At 1:23 a.m., the reactor exploded, but what happened in the next 10 seconds would change the world forever. No warning, no countdown, just a sudden, uncontrollable surge of power inside Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. In seconds, everything started to go wrong. And then, a blast so violent, it hurled a 1,000-ton steel lid straight into the air. But here's the part no one understood at the time. The explosion wasn't supposed to be possible. The night that made no sense. April 26, 1986. Inside the control room, operators were carrying out what seemed like a routine safety test. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. At least, that's what they believed. But within minutes, everything began to unravel. Power levels dropped, then spiked. Then surged beyond anything they had ever witnessed. And then, boom! But here's where it gets strange. Even after the explosion, many engineers still believed the reactor was intact. They assumed it was just a minor incident. They were wrong, horribly wrong. Because what they couldn't see was already spreading through the air. Radiation, and it wasn't just leaking. It was pouring out. A city built on trust. Just 3 kilometers away stood the quiet Soviet city of Pripyat, a model town. Built for the workers of the nuclear plant. Clean streets, schools, parks. Even a brand new amusement park set to open in just days. Nearly 50,000 people lived there. Families, children, none of them knew what had just happened. That night, some residents stepped outside and noticed something strange. A glowing blue light above the reactor. Beautiful, almost hypnotic. What they were seeing was ionizing radiation interacting with the air, but they didn't know that. How could they? No alarms, no warnings, no evacuation, just silence. The test that went wrong. To understand what really happened, we have to go back a few hours. Inside Reactor 4, engineers were preparing for a safety test. The goal? To see if the turbine could generate enough power to keep cooling systems running in case of a blackout. Simple in theory, but dangerously flawed in execution. Because the reactor they were using, the RBMK reactor, had a hidden design problem. Actually, several. It was unstable at low power. It had no proper containment structure. And worst of all, it had a dangerous flaw in its control rods. But no one in that control room fully understood the risk. And this is where everything begins to fall apart. Escalation. Mistakes stack up. The test was delayed for hours. Operators grew exhausted. Protocols were ignored. Safety systems were switched off. And then, power dropped too low. To compensate, they pulled out control rods, far more than they should have. Now the reactor was unstable, like a car racing downhill with failing brakes. Then came the final step. They initiated the test. Water flow shifted, steam pressure built rapidly, and suddenly power surged uncontrollably. One operator hit the emergency shutdown button. It should have stopped everything. But instead, it triggered the explosion. Why? Because of that fatal design flaw. The control rods, designed to slow the reaction, actually increased reactivity for a few critical seconds. Seconds that sealed their fate. The invisible disaster. After the explosion, chaos filled the control room. But outside, something far more terrifying was unfolding. Chunks of radioactive graphite were scattered across the ground. The reactor core was exposed, burning, releasing massive amounts of radiation into the atmosphere. Firefighters arrived within minutes. They wore no protective gear. They had no idea. They climbed onto the roof, stepping over radioactive debris. Some even picked it up. Within hours, the symptoms began. A metallic taste, burning skin, dizziness, the first signs of acute radiation sickness. But still, no one had told them the truth. The cover-up. In nearby regions, life went on as usual. Weddings, schools, morning routines. Meanwhile, radiation levels were skyrocketing. But Soviet authorities hesitated, admitting a nuclear disaster unthinkable. So they waited, and waited, and waited. It wasn't until a nuclear plant in Sweden detected unusual radiation that the world began asking questions. Only then did the truth begin to surface. But even then, it was incomplete, controlled, sanitized. Twist, it wasn't just human error. For years, the official story blamed the operators. Human error. Carelessness. But that wasn't the full truth. Because when investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something far more disturbing. The reactor design itself was fundamentally flawed. The RBMK system had no containment dome, a positive void coefficient, making it unstable under certain conditions, and that deadly control rod flaw. In other words, even a small mistake could trigger catastrophe. And that night, multiple small mistakes aligned perfectly, like dominoes. The real cause. So what really happened in Chernobyl? It wasn't just one failure. It was a chain reaction of failures. Human, technical, systemic, a dangerous test, an unstable reactor design, a lack of safety culture, and a system that discouraged questioning authority. Together, they created the perfect storm. And when it hit, there was no stopping it. A termath, a silent enemy. In the days that followed, evacuation finally began. Buses filled the streets of Pripyat. Residents were told they would return in a few days. They never did. The city remains abandoned to this day, a frozen moment in time. Meanwhile, thousands of workers, known as liquidators, were sent in to contain the disaster, to clear the debris, to build a concrete sarcophagus over the reactor. Many of them paid with their lives. And the radiation, it didn't stay local. It spread across Europe. Invisible, silent, lingering for decades. The final question. Today, the ruins of Chernobyl still stand. A warning, a reminder. But here's the question that still haunts experts. Could it happen again? Nuclear technology has improved. Safety standards are stricter. But the core issue remains the same. Human systems, human decisions, human error. Because in the end, Chernobyl wasn't just a nuclear disaster. It was a failure of trust. A moment when confidence in technology blinded people to its risks. And when everything went wrong, there was no one left to stop it. The explosion lasted seconds, but its consequences are still unfolding today. If you want more cinematic stories and hidden truths like this, subscribe to Reality Doc's Decode.